of Monterey Public Radio. We'll do a little more of Imagine maybe at the end of the hour here. This is Mae Brussell, 375-3082. Hello, you're on the air.
Hi, Mae. This is John.
Yes?
That song you just played, that reminded me of high school.
Yeah, okay. You were young, huh?
Yeah, one of our yearbooks has the words to that song in it.
Make you sad?
Yeah.
Yeah, it makes me sad. I think of the Peace Summit and of what he was trying to say and how hard the elements were on them just to think about peace. And now Reagan, as his ship is sinking, wants to sit around and talk about 4% of the nuclear weapons being sent home.
Well,
4%.
I guess it's his swan song.
Yeah, it makes you sad. It makes me sad every time I hear it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, this is the anniversary of Lennon's death. It's 7 years.
Yeah. Oh, one other thing. I tried to call 2 weeks ago
Mm-hmm.
when your board wasn't working on incoming calls.
Yeah.
Just to let you know, I was on. It was ringing for 20 minutes and no one answered.
Well, it was a busy sound, yeah.
No, it was ringing.
It was ringing.
Yes.
But it wasn't ringing.
No, it was ringing where I was.
Yeah, but there was no indication here. I didn't get it on.
I understand.
Yeah.
But one thing I wanted to bring up, you were talking the week before that, 3 weeks ago, about how a Satanist got a security clearance
Yes.
in the military. And that reminded me of a conversation I had with a Mormon friend about 10 years ago. He just left the military, and one of his assignments was to NSA.
Yes.
Well, he had a security clearance, but shortly after he got it, it was taken away from him.
Oh, really?
And the reason apparently was because he was a Mormon.
Oh, no. No. Mormons are high up in government.
Yes, but apparently they have a conscience, or a lot of them do, and if there's something they don't like that's secret, then they might publicize it.
Uh-huh.
And the Satanists probably wouldn't.
Yeah.
More than likely wouldn't.
Yeah. Well, if the Satanism and Church of Set is dependent upon human sacrifice, can you imagine why you'd have a security clearance if part of the operation is humans and children being cut up alive?
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty heavy. I mean, and going to the castle of Heinrich Himmler, they couldn't go to the home of Karl Marx every week and pray.
That's true.
Why Himmler? Oh, it's terrible. Yeah, listen, I'm glad you called.
Okay.
Okay.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay. 375-3082. I might mention John Lennon was killed on the 8th of December, and the very next day, Francesco Pazienza and Michael Ledeen were in the offices of Alexander Haig. Just a short while later, 4 weeks later, Haig was Secretary of State. Ledeen worked for the National Security Agency, and Pazienza is in jail in Italy for having killed 85 or more people. Hello, you're on the air.
Yes, I'm calling about a comment you made last week about Jesse Jackson. We were talking about Mayor Washington's death.
Yeah.
And you said that if he were half a man, that he would go in and, become mayor of Chicago.
I thought he should, yes.
And why do you say if he were half a man? I get the feeling you think he's very weak, and I wondered if you could clarify that statement.
Well, this is just a personal feeling. I think that you can have very big goals like, I want to be president of the United States. First of all, no black man's going to be president, not in these times, okay? Not when 49 states want Reagan. Because to come down from, say, a big goal, which isn't attainable, but gives you a lot of mileage, meeting people and, ruffling your feathers and telling you how great you are, to nestle into a city. If you saw the comments of the black community when Washington was dead, they said he's the only hope we had. He's the best friend the blacks had. He was the only person of real political activism that wasn't part of that old clique. Mayor Daley, the fellow that replaced him, I understand, who would right away give them some hope that, okay, if you're going to take one, then I'm going to take his place. That's what I think. These grand gestures that I have, a lot of people don't share those ideas, but I think he should have just stood right up there and said, no, you can't do this. We've had enough already, and I'm going to give those people hope and plus more. I can put off this thing for 4 more years, and I'm going to tackle this job because we need it now. That was what I was thinking of.
Okay. So you think he's kind of capitalizing on this national hype, so to speak? And
Well, I felt that at the time of the last elections, he and his Rainbow Coalition, he has gotten a lot of people to register. Without their registering, we wouldn't have had the Bork nomination would have been turned down. He got many blacks in the South to register that helped the members of the judiciary make their decisions. But what I feel is that he would not support Mondale and Ferraro in the last election, and all we needed is the same people that turned down Bork. All we needed was just a few more votes in every state, and we wouldn't have had Reagan at all. We wouldn't have had the Supreme Court. He's already appointed 250 judges around the country. They're going to be in for a lifetime. He's changed the whole nature of this country. And the judges he made are just horrendous. I'm anxious to see what happens. There's a civil rights case up in the San Francisco area of people who were protesting in San Francisco at the time of the conventions that were locked up, and the civil rights case is going before Judge Jensen. Well, Lowell Jensen was part of the Alameda Mafia that was locking up all these people in the 60s and 70s, that time period. And I don't know how a person with a civil rights issue can face Reagan's appointee, Judge Lowell Jensen.
yeah.
And I think that the election motto in 1980-84 should be anybody but Reagan.
Oh, absolutely.
ABR is what it should have been, and he should forget his differences, and you and they and we, just like they did with Bork. You have one goal, anybody but Reagan, and everyone knew the Supreme Court issues would be coming up. So he gives up two. That isn't much. He's going to get, and Bork's still active, but he's going to saturate this court. He's appointing people 40 years old, so they'll be in 40 years.
Right.
And that's where I think Jesse Jackson could have helped Mondale to swing it, in some way, take a cabinet position. And I think in Chicago, where you have this awful political group that have treated the minority so badly, and the FBI had their programs against the Fred Hampton and the murders and the Black Panthers and the way they live in the Chicago situation. I personally, this is an ideal world, and I know we don't live in one. My feeling was just give up something like this campaigning and give those people something that they really need, which is hope. There's no hope among them or the youth.
Well, do you think that he believes that he cannot become president? I mean, do you think he really believes that?
Well, I think the polls and the polls are always run by staunch Republicans. They'll tell him, you're the greatest, you're on top, you're going to win, you're the greatest. And they're inflating his ego because he knows he'll be important in the Democratic Party. But he really should unite the Democratic Party and not split it.
But, if he does go all the way to the convention, I think he has a chance to become Secretary of State, which would be great.
You can't become Secretary of State unless your party wins the votes.
Oh, but I think that we will win.
Yeah,
I do because...
Well, I'll tell you tomorrow, if he ran against George Bush, Bush would win.
You really believe that, even with what happened with the stock market?
Of course. Bush would. Jesse Jackson has no plan in the stock market. Bush is a wealthy oil man. He's been ambassador to China, ambassador to the UN. He's been vice president 8 years. He's a former CIA director. Tell me if a black man who's never had a public office, remember Jesse Jackson's never been a governor or a mayor.
I know, but I think he'd be a great Secretary of State.
Yeah, well, why did Reagan win 49 states then?
I know.
Bye-bye, thanks.
Okay, bye.
Okay. Oh, incidentally, I remember now I forgot to bring in the material on NutraSweet, but if you saw Phil Donahue this week with Ralph Nader, he was talking about NutraSweet. I'll take this call and I'll get back to that. Hello, you're on the air.
Hi, I'd like to hear a little more about Cameroon, and I'll hang up and listen.
Cameroon. Okay. Well, he hung up. I did a lot of broadcasts on Cameroon. When the explosions went off, I believe that those people were being tested by the neutron bomb. That explosion took place August 21st, 1986. And I believe the people involved in that neutron bomb were Shimon Peres, that Israel was testing it for the United States, just as Israel was sending arms to Iran until we could really officially be doing it. It involved Alexander Haig, who was pushing for the deployment of the neutron bomb involved John Singlaub, who was arguing with Jimmy Carter. When Carter was president, Singlaub left the Army about the neutron bomb, and William Casey. Next week, I'll do some more. I have a World Watchers in Germany who has been sending me articles on the neutron bomb and the placement of neutron bombs in Germany and France and Germany uniting on the neutron. If you have the neutron bomb, you don't need any of the weapons that they're talking about right now with the Soviet Union and the President of the United States at this time. And I'm not sure that the neutron bomb testing wasn't one of the reasons for the quick meeting at Reykjavik and that followed right on the heels of that, and for the meetings now to have some semblance of peace, because that's the perfect weapon. It's the weapon that kills all people and animals but leaves the houses and the grass intact, and you can go back and use the property and the churches and the buildings and so forth. It just gets rid of the annoyance of people around, and it's a perfect way to sanitize this earth of hundreds and thousands or millions of people who are superfluous, that the system, the combined systems of heads of states, don't intend to house, feed, educate, or employ. And those are the key standards by which you can tell whether they want them killed or whether they want them to live. And so next week, we'll get off the Satan and the satanic rituals and the sacrifices just for a few weeks, and I'll do some on the neutron bomb for you, and I'll fill it in more and update you on that. Hello, you're on the air.
Oh, hi. I'm calling from Santa Cruz. I've listened to you for a long time. I used to listen to you in Sacramento.
What?
I used to listen to you in Sacramento.
Oh, good. What was that, K-San?
KZAP.
Yeah, wait a minute. Somebody wants to come in the room. Let me see what they want.
Okay.
What do you want to do? Huh? Oh, we want to get a record. Okay, yeah, KZAP. Okay, yeah, it was about 3 years on KZAP.
Yeah, a long time ago.
That's right.
Well, I thought it was interesting that you brought up this stuff about Satan and worship and Aleister Crowley.
Uh-huh.
I had a friend years ago who really was into the Aleister Crowley books, and they always gave me a bad feeling.
Yeah.
But I thought I'd make a comment to you that you might find interesting. At the time, in relationship to counterculture, the feeling, one of the reasons people were attracted to the Aleister Crowley stuff is because his writings really encouraged drug use.
Encourage drugs.
Yeah.
Oh,
I thought
absolutely.
it was great and wonderful, and it was
Oh, absolutely.
almost like your responsibility.
Yeah.
And the other thing was that if you confronted someone with, well, what about all this stuff about, all this, which at the time I didn't take it serious, and I said all this silliness about sacrificing things, and people, oh, that's not true.
Uh-huh.
They'd say that's not true.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if you put the two together, well, these terrible things aren't true, and then inducing people or encouraging people to use drugs, it's kind of interesting, and I don't really know what to make of it, but I also follow these things in the paper with these various Son of Sam type murders and things, and I always wonder what's really happening. And I just wanted to say I thought it was very interesting that you brought up Crowley, because I always got a bad feeling off of that stuff. And I also have made the same judgment about the New Age business with the encouraging you to be kind of a potato head.
Yeah, encouraging you to stay away from thinking. You're called the gloom and doom. I've been told, oh, that's gloomy. That's, and these people, you can't have a serious political discussion. That's out.
Yeah.
It's just out. Just, besides Crowley, see, he came over here at a time, as in 1944, when Sir William Stevenson came over from British intelligence to start working for our Defense Department, combining the two. And that's the time when I.G. Farben was beginning to make those 34 million LSDs that Allen Dulles of the OSS would distribute in this country. And Aleister Crowley was the perfect one to say, take these and drop out. It was sex and drugs, have a good time.
Well, also lately there's a new drug. It's called ecstasy.
Oh, I've heard of that.
I've never had it myself, and I would never have it. But I've known people who've taken it, and they, it reminds me exactly what happened when acid hit the streets in the late 60s and the early 70s. It's real similar. People saying, oh, there's no side effects.
Sure, they give, say, 100,000 that are fine, and then they start lacing it.
Yeah, but, people even pay a therapist or something, a couple $100 to sit there and do it. And I just think it's really weird. Well, where did this one come from,
Yes.
And I realize that as children, my generation were duped.
Absolutely.
And I feel like it's not that it really did anything to hurt us permanently physically. I mean, it may or may not have. And I even wonder about AIDS being connected to the drug.
Yeah. Well, there is a big connection there too.
Yeah.
But a friend of mine. Well, he's much younger. He's a friend of one of my children. He was going to see Beatles movie Help, and he just mentioned, well, he saw it last week and he got stoned on acid. I said, you what? You took acid? And I said, how can you do this? How can you? He's so young, he doesn't remember all the zero heads that were knocked out. And some people listen to this program and they say, well, I take acid and you shouldn't be so hard on acid. But I'd like to meet them, on a day-to-day and see how they function,
Yeah.
And I can't believe that this whole next generation is going in. I've heard of the ecstasy and stuff. They're just absolute pawns. I said, well, I've seen Help 2 times, and I just think it's marvelous. What do I have to take acid to see Help? I don't understand that.
Well, just imagine what may have happened with the energy in the 60s if the CIA hadn't passed out the acid.
Oh, boy. Yeah, then we would have had a different thing. Listen, thanks for calling.
Okay.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay. Yeah, you can talk. The people that want these things and like them can justify them, and those who don't can see the harm. But I feel it's a political ploy that is used to harm and wipe out a whole generation. Hello, you're on the air.
Here. Hi, Mae.
Hi.
I wanted to follow up some Mayor Washington stuff.
Okay.
I don't know if you mentioned last week on whether or not his death was from natural causes or not.
Well,
But I can think of several reasons of why it might not have been.
uh-huh.
And I'm just curious if you have any information on that, or if you think that it was.
Well, I'm going to do more next week. Those are when I get away from Satan and do the less strenuous for Christmas. We'll talk about death squads. Okay.
Right.
But people say, oh, somebody came to me and said, well, that he weighed 200 and something and he was overweight and he was a high candidate for a heart attack. And I say, yeah, but James Baldwin died this week and he's bone skinny.
Yeah, he wasn't that overweight either. I mean.
But the point, he had just won an election. And then I also commented that the guy who was going to be replacing him already had a death threat. So I said, is he too fat too,
Yeah, he had just won an election. He had just gotten a working majority on the city council. He's one of the most popular black leaders in the country. He was black. He was gay. There's 2 reasons right there.
Yeah.
He was a Jesse Jackson supporter. I think that might have had a lot to do with it. He was one of the first major political leaders in this country to throw his weight behind Jackson.
I wish I'm going to get a computer this year, probably by 1988. I swear I'll get a computer. And in there, I want to put, when these people, and I'm separating those files now, the many people that die on the eve of a contract, on the eve of about going to Madison Square Garden, just cut a record, just going to make it like, say, Mama Cass, sure we know she's fat, but she chokes on food just when she's going to have a big tour, just came into a lot of money, when people don't want these people around, and the timing of Harold Washington was so horrendous, considering if his heart were weak, it would be in the running of the campaign, not in the victory.
Right.
That's where the real problem would come.
Also, I wouldn't count out Jesse Jackson for becoming a mayor of Chicago. I think that that there's a very good chance that he will run for mayor of Chicago in the special election, which probably won't happen until 1989.
I would like to see him have some elected positions before he goes on. The problem, you can say, well, there's racism because you don't have a black or you don't have a woman, as president. But they have to put in their dues. People like Margaret Thatcher and, there's a woman, or you take a black leader. He has put in so much time in his government that there's no question about how he can handle these affairs. You have to have be a governor, be a mayor, be a member of Congress for 8 years. When you can handle those campaigns and those backstabbers and the way that the system runs, then you can understand. You can't come in the White House just off the street and think you can handle those dogs. Those, I was reminded not to use the word dogs because dogs are nice, but those beasts, those people, Washington and elsewhere.
Yeah, well, I think there is a really good chance that he will run for mayor of Chicago and win and have an elected office. I don't think that he's in a position to pursue the presidency this time around all the way until the fall elections, but I think that what he's doing is in a very strong position right now within the Democratic Party to have an influence on the primary.
Well, what he's doing, he's the only voice of reason that makes sense half the time. Hear him speak, the others sound like a bunch of illiterates, and they are. But he really has a very eloquent way and a very sensible way of saying things. So it's nice that his voice is heard. That's the one advantage of floating around, is that some people can have a contrast between what they want to give us and what's available out there.
Right. Well, thank you very much.
Thanks for calling.
Bye-bye.
Okay, 375-3082. Did I say for this program that the views expressed here are those of myself and do not necessarily reflect the views of Kazoo staff or board of directors? That will cover us for this hour. I don't remember if I said that. But this is Mae Brussell, 375-3082. Hello, you're on the air. Hello? Hello?
Hello?
Yeah, you're on the air.
Okay. Saw John Judge in Aptos yesterday, and that was
Oh, good.
quite good. I got a thing from the Information Network Against War and Fascism that the guy was there with his table. There's a 2-page thing that he kind of articleized in a way called Pat Robertson, the Making of an American Fascist Leader.
Uh-huh.
And it's quite good. Throughout it, he's kind of saying it's not at all that even the liberals who try and poo-poo him miss the point when they think, well, all Robertson wants to try and do is get to be president in 1988. It's like Hitler and his parties in the late 20s and early 30s. They kept coming back, and they started out small, and they didn't get much of a majority initially.
Oh, Pat Robertson wants to do away with Medicare and Social Security.
And all the other ingredients, the racism and the genocidal leanings and all the rest.
We're in bad shape, I'll tell you.
He would really like to throw that stuff out. I also got a newspaper today, the State Press from Arizona State University, November 19th, with a large article that begins on page 1, Jailed Contra Details Plans to Kill TAMs. This is Jesus Garcia.
Oh, yeah.
And he's talking at one point, I'm not worth a dime on the street, I'm not worth one dime. As soon as I hit the street, they'll put someone near me. It would be to their advantage to hit me as early and as quickly as possible. For not killing, for not taking a man's life, I signed my own death sentence.
He also signed his death sentence when he said that the plan to blow up the embassy in Nicaragua was George Bush's baby.
Right, Garcia was the one that said that.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
When you say the former CIA director, who's the vice president, wanted it blown up as an excuse for altercations, that Garcia signs it then. People don't realize what deadly dogs they're dealing with.
That's right.
Do you want to give the address of Paul Bernardino's group on the air? Do you want to tell me? Okay.
It's 495 Ellis Street.
Ellis.
And then it says number 1271.
Okay.
And that's in San Francisco.
Mm-hmm.
94102.
Mm-hmm.
And he has a phone number that you can call between 8 and 11 a.m. In 415-673-4609.
Okay, he has a group against fascism, and he has a lot of my tapes, David Emery's, and also John Judge's.
Danny Sheehan and Judge and other people, John Stockwell, these other guys, Philip A.G. He had the tape, the videotape of In Pure Blood.
Oh, yeah, that's good.
Right. He was selling that yesterday.
Oh, he had the video.
Yeah.
How much does he sell it for?
I think he was selling it for $30.
Okay, I just said people give him the business if they want one.
Oh, he seemed really to be quite well stocked with this stuff. I was pleased to see the Pure Blood thing because I remembered you talking about it.
Yeah, and I just announced tonight that new video company that has it. But if you want to give him the business, that's great.
And he's closer by. Yeah, I don't know exactly what that would cost for shipping, but
yeah,
he's got a lot of stuff there available. I'd like to read very briefly, apart from Henry Gonzalez's 8th speech on the House floor.
Wait a minute. How long is this going to take? Because we got to take another calls now.
30 seconds. It's about 6 sentences.
Okay.
He was talking about...
What date?
This is from July 27, 1987, in the Congressional Record. I sent away for him to get the House Resolution 111, the articles of impeachment against Reagan. And he was very nice. He sent me back the copy of that, and he also sent me these 8 speeches that he made on the House floor, the impeachment of Ronald Reagan's numbers 1 through 8. And here, practically the whole way through number 8, he's talking about half our job in the House is to communicate and educate. When those communication channels are closed, and they have been in my case, I have had periods, and in fact, I have never really had the 100% endorsement of my local media. It is true that fragmentarily from time to time, yes, I do, but within the last couple of years, through omission, no. In other words, we can talk all we want about totalitarian government and how they control the dissemination of information. In our country, we do not have overt censorship, but we have censorship by omission. And when you have a president such as the one in power today, powerful men from the corporate structure of our society, the most powerful, the richest, the most potent, such as J. Peter Grace, the multi-billionaire who in effect is the one actually shaping the so-called Latin American policy, which is a non-policy. It is minds like J. Peter Grace that are defining what communism is and what it is not.
Okay, thank you. Should we cut that off now and then do the rest another time?
Yeah.
Okay, J. Peter Grace, of course, was roommate at Yale with Pat Robertson.
That's right.
And J. Peter Grace brought Otto Ambrose to this country from I.G. Farben, the chemist that made the Zyklon B that exterminated 10,000 a day in poison gas.
Right.
So that's J. Peter Grace making our policies, close to Pat Robertson, and Henry Gonzalez at least appreciates that it mentions his name.
Sure.
Thanks. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you for calling.
Sure.
Okay. Henry Gonzalez is one of the most courageous members of Congress, and as a result, he gets his isolation where he's not quoted in the newspapers around the country. Hello, you're on the air.
Hi. It seemed like I heard today that Mrs. Gorbachev had met with, I guess it was Pamela Harriman, the wife of old Avril Harriman.
Oh, yeah. He was ambassador to Soviet Union way back. That's why.
I see.
Avril Harriman, yeah.
Was he also Secretary of State at some point?
Yeah, and he also was in charge of the main genocidal policies that put Hitler into power.
Yeah, okay. I remember hearing something about Harriman, and he was a big... It seemed like he was significant in arms control. Maybe,
Oh, no, not arms control.
or maybe test ban treaty?
No, he had government official positions, but he's most known to me as for his genocidal, his group with the Morgans and the Mellons and the genocidal policies that became race policies when Hitler came into power.
Uh-huh.
But he was stationed as ambassador over at Moscow, and so this is his widow that she met with today?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I mean, these people don't study over there, and Americans don't study it, so why should the Russians? The background, some of the stuff on Harriman, he's always had dealings, or he had them with the Soviet Union, and of course it's, to meet with these people is just to be shocking, but what can you say?
Well, yeah, there just seems to be some, I don't know, some...
Well, that's like Loretta Scott King.
Between these people, what?
Loretta Scott King, on the anniversary of Martin Luther King's death last year, the guest of honor to get the Peace Award, Martin Luther King Peace Award, was Ryosha Sasakawa, who would read the books on the Yakuza and the Japanese mafia and the Japanese war criminals. He describes himself as the #1 fascist of, if there could be such a thing, of the Japanese during the war. He was part of the death squads that killed all political opponents until the anniversary. This is Pearl Harbor, just the anniversary of Pearl Harbor this evening, December the 7th.
Yeah,
and he's Japanese mafia, he's Japanese, he set up the World Anti-Communist League, and he created Reverend Moon, who helps with these death squads, who works with Klaus Barbie. So what does Coretta Scott King have with Ryosha Sasakawa?
That's another good question.
I mean, just take this country where people have access to the amount of information that all you listeners, the world watchers, have with me, and wonder what Mrs. Gorbachev has with Mrs. Harriman, and then what's worse is Coretta Scott King here with Ryosha Sasakawa.
Or the Jesuits supporting the Sandinistas.
Yeah.
I mean, that's, there's lots of contradictions that have to be, investigated. What was this thing about J. Peter Grace? I heard that name somewhere.
Oh, J. Peter Grace comes from the Grace family, the Grace Shipping Company.
Yes.
And there's a book called The Rape of Peru. I've never been able to get my hands on it. The Grace Company's always worked with the top Nazis. They're shipping in chemical and restaurants, a lot of chemical, agricultural. And when Reagan wanted to cut the costs in this country, the expenses, he hired or appointed J. Peter Grace to be in charge of cutting federal expenses across the board. And his roommate at Yale was Pat Robertson. And after World War II, as a chemist, J. Peter Grace brought to this country a man named Otto Ambrose, who was sentenced, I believe, Nuremberg prison, and he got out. Otto Ambrose was the chemist for Adolf Hitler that made the poison gas for exterminations. a mass murderer who, the 6 million were gassed besides the 60, 70 million that were killed in wars. But the gas of I.G. Farben, he was the head chemist. Read the book, The Crime and Punishment of I.G. Farben by Mr. Borkin. And that chemist was brought to this country by J. Peter Grace.
Mm. And one other question. It seemed like I saw something about some British film or television special depicting the Reykjavik conference with actors.
Oh, wasn't that awful? Holy mackerel.
Well, I'd like to see that whole thing. Do
You
know
were...
the name of it or anything?
Well, maybe it's on tonight. It was a simulated thing. When I saw Reagan and Gorbachev, the actors, they were just so bad. Maybe it's good. I didn't set the video recorder. I couldn't believe it.
Yeah. Oh, so it was on in the United States.
Oh, yes, it's either tonight. Look in your TV guide. And
Do you know the name of it?
No, it's called Reykjavik.
Oh, okay.
I think it was NBC. I think.
Oh, okay.
Thanks for calling.
All right.
Okay.
Goodbye.
Goodbye. I couldn't believe. Maybe you'd get the lines straight. Nobody was there, so they're using the dialogue. But I don't know who was at Reykjavik that wrote that script. Hello, you're on the air.
Hi. Has anybody ever given you any more information about that movie made by Pasolini about the fascists in Italy that sacrificed the children?
No, I've never. I looked it up in my film club thing, and it isn't listed.
Well, I've been trying to reach you the last few weeks, and you've had all those problems. But it was directed by a man called Pier Paolo Pasolini.
Say it slower now.
Peter. No, Pier. P-I-E-R.
P-I-E-R.
Paolo.
P-A-O-L-O.
Pasolini.
Uh-huh.
P-A-S-O-L-I-N-I.
Okay.
And it's called Sallow.
Uh-huh.
Or the 120 Days of Sodom.
Oh, gosh, I looked it up in that film festival thing that I have. They've got about 800 titles.
Oh, it's extremely hard to find. It was the last film he made, incidentally. Shortly after it, he was murdered.
Oh.
Because he was known to be homosexual, and some person he picked up or something like that ended up, they drove to some deserted place in Italy, and the guy he picked up killed him.
Pasolini.
Yeah, Pasolini.
I bet he was killed because it seems that anyone who has information on these things...
Well, it's a very interesting story, and it's also an extremely hard film to find because it depicts all sorts of graphic acts of cruelty and violence and sex, because it's about a bunch of fascists in Mussolini's Italy just took over a little town.
Yeah, but what I mean is when most of these rituals are secret, and when somebody films them, I can see where they would be targets for murder.
Well, I never saw the film itself, but I saw several stills from it, and I read a lot about it in a magazine called Film Comment.
Uh-huh.
They're pretty old issues. I don't know if they could be found anymore.
Well...
But what these fascists basically did, they took over a little town, and they gathered together about a couple hundred of the best physical specimens of the young people, male and female, and they set about debasing them and basically torturing them and killing them. Mm-hmm. And they dressed up in priests' robes and cardinals' hats and everything, and watched it all taking place.
Oh, boy.
So it sounds a lot similar to some of the things you've been hearing about. I think you should try calling up some of these video stores up in a larger area like Berkeley or someplace like that.
Yeah, okay, I will.
Be able to find it.
Thanks a lot.
Okay.
Bye-bye. Yeah, I wrote that down, that Sallow Republic is where Mussolini went until he was killed, and I'll see if I can find that. Hello, you're on the air.
Oh, hi, Mae.
Hi.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I've been listening. I just think you're doing a great job. I wish there were more people in America like you.
Thank you.
That were concerned about where we're heading. And,
yeah.
I'm really worried that there's too much power invested in just one person. Like the imperial presidency.
Yeah, well... the power's okay if a person wants to make a change. Say, if he wants to have a peace conference and cut down weapons, then the one person can do it. Then the power is the people around him and not him. The power is divided, and if it's all one-sided, it can overweigh a good president. If a president is bad, he has too much power, but the people around him have a lot of power more than the single person.
Right. It seems Reagan seems to be seeing the light recently.
Yeah, it's really amazing what's happened. Have you ever seen anything so dramatic or so weird? I understand that Michael Deaver has a new book out, and he's lambasting Nancy Reagan, and I can't believe how these people are turning on each other. It was in the news last night, and they're attacking her and how she influences him, and Michael Deaver was the liaison, from Nancy to the cabinet and all around. He was like their son. He was so close. And now he's writing a book attacking them.
Yeah.
He used their name to build up his business. He's under indictment for that now. And he made hundreds of thousands of dollars and was so close to that family. Can you believe they write books about each other?
Yeah, it's really a big circus. Yeah. One more thing, you were talking about cults and everything, and I think one of the best definitions of a cult is that when the power of love gets changed into the love of power.
Yes, yeah.
And I sometimes think this whole culture seems to be one big cult,
Yes, yeah. Power and selfishness. Yeah, it's really a problem, and I don't know how it's ever going to get back on the right track.
Yeah, really.
It's terrible. Well, listen, I thank you for calling.
You're welcome.
Okay, yeah, it's the cults in separating my files. There's the cult, and then there's the occult. We defined it as, take this call, and then I'll tell you how I separate those files. Hello, you're on the air.
Hello, good evening. I'm calling from Santa Cruz. I just wanted to tell you, this is not political particularly, but you were talking about Aleister Crowley, who, of course, was the famed literary figure in England, too,
yes,
besides his witchcraft. But in the books of Sybil Leek, whom you may know, who was also a famous witch, but she was a so-called white witch.
Yes.
And she has always condemned him.
Yes, she was a friend of mine. I knew her.
Well, it is interesting that one of the same, she talked about black witches and white witches. And
yes.
She was very, very, she condemned him.
Yes, she was very active. You say it's not political, but I believe that she died an untimely death because she was continuously working to find out who killed John Kennedy.
Well, that may well be. I meant that I was only bringing this up from a...
Yeah, but there is a difference. I know the difference between the two, but the parts of Aleister Crowley that are very, very evil, or talking about sacrificing people, and the things he did, the spreading of excrement around, he thought that was funny and very important. And a lot of the rituals that these children have gone through at the nursery schools is having to eat feces and drink urine, and they're smeared from their head to toe with feces. Yes. And he also talked about that and was into flagellation and also feces smeared all over themselves, which isn't very funny, and it's being taken over by the very people that have been studying his material.
Yes, I realize that. I just meant that there are two kinds of witches.
Oh, well, I understand that. Yeah, I understand that. I don't mean all collective witches. What I'm talking about is him in particular.
Yes.
And the influence he's had, like on the Church of Set, and that's the Church of Satan, and this is the group that are working with the Joint Chiefs of Staff that are into the military mind control operations and so forth. I'm talking about a separate from the, as a matter of fact, a lot of the witches in England influenced Crowley, but this Gerald Gardner, who was very much into what you may call the other side of the witchcraft, who was, say, a good guy, also was close to Crowley and the OTO Church and set up magical groups and then began to blend the two where they used to be separate.
Oh.
See, that's the danger, is that what was used to be separate, like a common denominator comes in and brings Crowley to the other group.
Well, that doesn't sound very good.
No, that it's like, well, let me give you an example. You have an ordinary group of peace people that are anti-war, that want to demonstrate against the war and so forth. Then they get infiltrated by agents of the government who say, well, let's do this, or let's be more violent, or let's be in front of these places where we're not supposed to be, and they ruin it for the group because they infiltrate what began to be a good group.
Yes, I realize all this was very popular during the late 60s.
Yeah, but now, from my papers and what I read, it's not more than popular. It's going on all over the country, large amounts of it. I have an article here, Ku Klux Klan training the children in strangling and decapitation. And this is a camp in in Texas, 50 acres, where Boy Scouts as young as 13 and also in Texas, Louisiana, learn how to choke someone, how to decapitate, how to wring chickens' necks, how to use chemical and biological and radioactive warfare techniques. And these are part of the Explorer Scouts, the Civil Air Patrol. They're 13 to 19, and they're taught some very terrible things under what used to be a very good movement, the Boy Scouts. Michael Aquino was an Eagle Scout. So all of a sudden what was 100% kosher when I was growing up, the Scouts was okay. Now you're hearing these terrible stories.
Well, this sort of extreme decadence and depravity is usually a sign of the ending of a time.
Yeah, I think a time, yeah, that's right. You either deserve to survive or you don't.
Yes. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you for calling.
Yes.
Bye-bye. Okay, yeah, there are a lot of common denominators, but there's one fellow who was in, Gerald Gardner, who was into witchcraft in England, the kind that didn't involve these sacrifices or rituals, but then he would go back and forth to Crowley and was also part of that. Hello, you're on the air.
About Harriman.
Okay.
He was, I'm not that sure myself. I remember he was also involved with the Germans, with Alan Dulles.
Yes, very thick. Yeah.
And he did have something to do with that test ban treaty.
Oh, he did?
Yes, I'm not exactly sure.
I'll have to look it up. I have a lot of material on Averell Harriman. I'll look it up.
That up. I know he was. I know he was instrumental in beginning this whole arms control process with the Soviets. I think they're grateful, So maybe.
You think that there were many stories that one of the reasons John Kennedy was murdered was that he went against the the nuclear test ban went through, and he didn't want the pollution on the on the planet where we're testing so many of these atomic weapons and getting plutonium-90 in our milk and through the cows and food. And Alan Dulles of the CIA, formerly OSS, was so opposed to everything Kennedy did, I can't believe that he would go along with it. I'll have to see what the test ban. I'll look it up because we're not really sure either of us what he did.
Yeah, well, Alan Dulles and Harriman, had been friends for decades.
I'm trying to think of the law office. That I think Prescott Bush, now I'm going to check this out, but Prescott Bush, the senator and the father, George Bush, I believe was in the law office with Harriman. I'll look that up when I get home.
Okay, well, Harriman and Dulles go back a long way.
Yeah, and Dulles, the OSS, CIA, yeah.
Their families have been together for a long time.
Oh, yes.
Although they work from opposite ends of the political spectrum, the end result of their activities generally works to strengthen the Soviets vis-a-vis the United States.
I'll have to look up the Harriman stuff.
Okay, good.
The one thing I do remember is his work with the Museum of Natural History and his interest in genocide.
Yes, the Harrimans were eugenicists.
Eugenicists, that's right. That's where it came in, and they gave hunks of money to New York to that Museum of Natural History.
Yeah, and they donated land for eugenics.
Eugenics, that's exactly it, and they were into the precursors of Joseph Mengele and that crowd.
Yeah, and Hitler.
And Hitler, that's right. That's what I remember about them.
So I don't know what the Soviets are doing with them. Okay.
Thanks.
It's a good story, though.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay, well, Mrs. Gorbachev is with the Harrimans. I'll have to look up exactly for you next week. I'll make note here and look up my Averell Harriman because it had to do with eugenics and genocide and the precursor for Alan Dulles and John Foster Dulles with Hitler with those projects. Hello, you're on the air.
Oh, hi, Mae. I just wanted to make a couple of comments, some things that I saw in the news tonight I'm really disgusted with Nancy Reagan.
Isn't she awful?
Oh, yeah. She's so transparent, and she's just denigrating the whole aura and everything about the office of being First Lady and this dreadful thing that she has against Mrs. Gorbachev because she took so long to answer her invitation.
And because she talks like a Marxist.
Oh, she's really awful.
Can you imagine?
I'm really sick of her. And the other thing is a comment that I heard where Mrs. Gorbachev went to a school, I don't know, grade school, I think, in Washington, D.C., and that some of the children in the grade school thought that she was the Queen of England. You know, that really bothered me. I thought, how? I mean, what kind of, what can I say? It's a symbol, you know, it's a sign of what's happening in our education.
Yes.
I mean, can you imagine that the president and Mrs. Reagan would go to Soviet Union and she would go to a grade school, and that they might think that she is, you know, the president's wife of the Philippines or Queen of England? There's no way.
Well, there's only one way to explain to me, in my mind, what's happening, and I believe that we merged with those, with Himmler in that group in 1943-44, and their goal was the 1,000-year Reich, and their goal was to get even with us for having not going to war against them and not having gotten along with them to hit Russia at the same time, make war with Russia. And I believe if you set your mind, pretend I'm wrong, but just play the game for a month, that we are a conquered country, that they have the cash and gold and money, that our money is out of the country, that our steel and factories are out of the country, that we are going to be reduced to the illiterates, the uneducated, the breeders for the armies, and that a handful will have the education and the pure air, and resorts and places to get away from the pollution, and gates and security, and that we are absolutely being bought up by Germany and England and Japan, and that our native populations and Americans here for 2 or 3 generations, middle class, will keep losing their standard of living and going down, that we are conquered. And part of conquering is to see in the school system that you don't learn.
Yes, I think it's truly happening. It saddens me, it grieves me terribly.
Well, Ralph Nader, again, I don't know if you saw him with this week on Phil Donahue, and he was talking about poisons in food again. And there he's got your apples with the poisons that go into it, and he was saying what I've said to all of you or my friends: don't buy any imported food now. Between now and the summer, eat what's seasonal. The tomatoes, the people are dying of them in poison. And in Mexico, before they come up here, they put them in a bath of chemical waters because they're in fields with no sanitation. And the grapes are poisoned, and the field workers are dying picking the grapes. And this has poison, and he's holding the cereals and the milk and the meat and the fish is not, one of the foods not tested. And our food, what he said was very important, and I haven't had a chance to do many broadcasts on just food. 50% of all the food in this country that is eaten is imported now. 50%. And they want to make us dependent. The food cartels at headquarters in Argentina and South America will decide whether we can have food eventually. If you begin to import it and they say, no, tomorrow you can't have it, then you're not even going to have it.
Yeah.
And so that I believe that this tragic situation of ignorance is something that is purposely being done, and the powers that be don't care at all.
Yeah, I agree. One other thing, and it's that this film that you were talking about, Italian film, you might check out some pornography shops.
Oh.
Because they might be very interested in that kind of film.
Oh, yes, the horror films. Okay, I was so mad. The Monterey Film Festival was here last year, and they had one first year, and I was really enthusiastic, and I got all these tickets. This year, it's going to come again in January, but they're going to have 13 hours of horror movies, one whole day continuously of horror movies. And I think, what in the heck are we doing in our society? Last year, they had some wonderful foreign films and marvelous things. What does this community need 13 hours of horror films for? Torturing and cutting up.
Charming.
Yeah, it's everywhere. Okay, I'll try the pornography. There's a place over, a couple of them in town here. If they haven't been run out of town, they used to be there. I'll see if I can get that at one of those places that has those kind of films.
Yeah, you might try up in the Bay Area, too. I mean, way up in the Bay Area, like San Francisco, Oakland, like that.
Okay, I'll go searching one of these days.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Okay. There's a lot of ladies calling this evening. Usually there's mostly men, and I'm glad to hear the ladies calling in and sharing information with me. And I like you both, but I think it's fun that there's been so many this evening. 3753082. My name is Mae Brussell. And any comments? This last caller didn't like Nancy's attitude, her little snide remarks about Mrs. Gorbachev and her attitude. She's just so petty. I don't know how these people stayed in there these 8 years. As I said last week, there's a calendar called Countdown on Reagan you can buy that's available now that gives you the countdown of how many days until he's out of office, 365, and you mark off your calendar. I don't think in our lifetime, even you young people, you'll never see a first lady and a president equal to those two. It would be hard to ever make them again. Hello, you're on the air.
Yeah, hi, a guy calling.
Your guy calling, okay.
Yeah. Mae, you talked about World War II a lot, and I just wanted to ask you something, maybe your feelings. Back when I was in college 10, 15 years ago, I had a U.S. history professor who was really good. He brought up a lot of things that the United States had been doing wrong, genocide of the Indians, all the way to Vietnam. When we got around to the World War I section of the class, he basically had stated that we had no business getting involved in that war. But if we were to have gotten involved, we probably should have been on the side of the Germans instead of the British and French, Imperial Germany. And he thought that maybe Hitler never would have come about. Germany, if they would have won the war, I don't really know. He didn't really have an idea of what would have happened. Maybe Europe would have got cut up several different slices in different ways. I'd just like to have your, since you study history so much, what is your feelings about that? I mean, this is kind of a what if, but again, how would it affect? Even we're talking about what if, but going to today, looking back at that time. Even they lost the war, but there's been so many other repercussions from that with so many other industrialists, and you've mentioned them, that have still risen to power, and they seem to have manipulated things anyway. I mean, I don't really see, in my opinion, that things wouldn't be much different from the way they are. And what do you think? And I'll take the answer off the air.
Well, how would things be different than they are? First of all, I can't figure out why we got in that first war at all. I, for the like of me, can't figure out what that was about, the shooting of Archduke Franz Ferdinand, and how millions of people were brought to slaughter and brought up from Australia and the British Empire, and the horrible things that happened in Verdun, the French fighting the Germans. None of it makes sense to me on how we got involved with that one. And then the Versailles Treaty was to punish Germans for their brutality against France and for, and it was terrible, poison gases, and the deaths in the trenches were just horrendous. And so we were going to strip them of their power. But I think that America was on the rise in building their empire and seeking control over a good part of the world, in the Philippines, Hawaii, and the South Pacific Islands, and Great Britain had their empire with Ceylon, Bombay, and Singapore. And influences we have in the South Pacific and all around. I think we wanted to squeeze Germany out and keep these things for ourselves, keep them landlocked, and try to keep them from rising in power. So we made a pretty strict Versailles Treaty, which they decided that day they would disregard anyway and throw it out the window. But the story of World War I, or why we got into World War I, is affected by another event that took place, and that was the Russian Revolution. And when that came into power, when that happened, when the Tsar was thrown over, then the whole alignment of Europe became totally different then, because here we had the Tsar's family was kicked out, and there were a lot of monarchs in Europe that identified with them. And the religion, for all purposes, the opiate of the people, was, for all purposes, put aside. This wasn't a big part of the revolution. They didn't need it, and it was washed underground as it's a diversionary from what we have to do. And a whole new government so threatened the Western world and the Eastern world that anything they did after the Russian Revolution was affected by the state of the Soviet Union. And Herbert Hoover, who was living over in England, had dual citizenship, hadn't been in the United States in 20 years, became Secretary of Commerce and began immediately arming Germany with the Solidarists, with the White Russians, and the Belgium and various Poles, arming them with members of the Tsar's army and the Tsar's family to fight the Russian Revolution. We were even fighting it for 2 years over there. So whatever started World War II and the terms of it were negated and rearranged by and affected by Russia. So it wasn't just the war that had a change, it was Russia. Now I'm going to stop because it is almost the top of the hour. I'll complete this program with a little bit more of Imagine. Just remember John Lennon. It was 7 years ago, tomorrow. He was a big factor in the cultures around the world and certainly remembered around the world. And while they sit and have their peace meeting at the summit, I think it's also to remember what John Lennon was saying and thinking, because I think he was thinking more of a larger meaning of peace rather than 4% of the nuclear weapons. And when these two men agree on everything and go home, we'll still have enough weapons to kill everyone in the world about 20 or 30 times over. So I don't even know what this whole thing is about. So I'll conclude with playing some more of John Lennon. This is Mae Brussell, and I'll be back with you next week.